So China has announced yet another round of tariff increases on the US to get back at Donald Trump. But they're insisting that this is going to be it. They're not going to raise their tariffs any further, while at the same time begging the European Union to ignore China's aggression into their markets and join them in their fight against that mean old Donald Trump. The dark reign of the communist empire in China, my friends, is a house of cards, and Xi Jinping knows this. He is doing everything possible to attempt to shore up his economic regime. Every dictatorship, every communist and fascist empire lives on the edge of a knife. If enough people in their empire aren't living well, the plebes, the average folks, will rise up with pitchforks to throw them out. And that's where China is right now. They are in dire straits. You see, despite the pretense that their economy is still growing at 5%, empty factories, unpaid wages, protests, and now the Yuan currency collapse threatens to undo decades of work that the Chinese regime has been engaged in to turn their evil empire into the next world superpower. For decades, everyone has sat by and watched as China stole and plundered technology, undermined the world's economy to gain power and influence, and yet did nothing. China's power is derived from corruption and semi-slave labor, and while they will, if left unchecked, eventually become powerful enough to put the world over the barrel, they are not there yet. The last big block in their way is the United States. This is why they have crept onto our shores, corrupted our neighbors with their brick and road initiative, their purchases designed to give them power and influence over neighboring nations. This includes Panama with the Panama Canal. They're using the canal to do surveillance. They're watching how our military and how goods are traveling through the Panama Canal. But now, Xi Jinping and his Chinese empire are facing both an external and internal crisis. This is from the YouTube channel China Observer, discussing the economic woes occurring within the regime thanks to Trump's tariffs.
浙江这边的厂，这个关税加上去之后。
How big of an impact has the tariff increase had on local factories in Zhejiang? I run a small factory and don't deal with foreign trade, so I'm not sure how much it would affect me. But I've noticed that my upstream suppliers who export raw materials haven't received any orders for a long time. Not even one container has shipped out. When they can't get orders, they try to switch to domestic sales. On April 7th, a TikToker from Foshan visited a newly built factory district and recorded footage of the vacant and neglected factory buildings.
你看这一排排啊。
He said, "Look at these factories that were just built last year. Now I can't even find a single person. There are no cars or people on the road. Some of these factories are single-story and others have multiple floors. The landlords spent nearly $1 billion yuan to build these. Just a few years ago, these beautiful buildings were all leased out by middlemen. You had to wait in line to rent a factory space. But now, there isn't a single customer coming to view the space. The new factory buildings behind me haven't even been renovated yet because the landlords are afraid of spending money if no one rents them."
So all is not well within China. Trump's art of the deal approach with his global trade war is a masterstroke. He's played China for a fool and has effectively put the US in position now to make deals with over 70 countries all at once, which will likely mean it'll involve harming China economically in the long run. With China facing 145% tariffs and the rest of the world at 10%, Trump has effectively isolated Beijing as the primary target. This isn't just an economic power move, it's psychological and political warfare. Donald Trump knows that China's economy is already under strain and is a house of cards that will likely crack before the US feels the full blowback. You see, in Trump's first term, his tariff battle set the stage for all of this. The US in 2016 had roughly 21% of our total imports coming in from China. After his trade battle in his first term, that percentage points dropped to 13%, which is why the effects of the trade war are largely unfelt by average Americans at this point. But not so with the Chinese, who are already feeling the strain. And so Xi Jinping is trapped, thanks to his culture of pride. You see, in a communist system where perception is power, Xi can't afford to look like he's caving to US pressure. Backing down publicly risks undermining his carefully crafted image as China's unassailable leader, especially after years of nationalistic rhetoric. A weak Xi Jinping would face internal challenges if he tried to back down. The very fact that China would signal that although they are raising tariffs on the 12th to 125%, but no further, is a desperate calculated move to avoid further escalation by Trump that would surely cripple China's export-driven economy. China's economy is much more exposed to trade disruptions than the US, and Xi Jinping knows it. And to compound one problem on top of another, China made a huge mistake threatening to flood global markets with cheap goods to offset their tariff losses in the early part of the global tariff move. This infuriated the European Union leaders, who already are wary of China's trade surplus on their markets. They don't like it. And this is precisely what Donald Trump appeared to be waiting for. It was the perfect timing to begin working on trade deals with the European Union. And Beijing now realizes the blunder that they have made and are trying to backpedal. They are begging the European Union to join them in opposing Trump's unilateral bullying, but the EU doesn't appear to be buying it. The European Union now realize that the opportunity Trump has created for them. Brussels has its own grievances, you see, with China. Their subsidized exports, their electric vehicle dumping, and their support for Russia in the Ukraine war. China's flip-flopping here is a sign that they are desperately trying to avoid being cornered. They are right where Donald Trump wants them, and they know it. Now, on top of all of this, the Chinese currency, the yuan, is sliding horribly right now. It is at its lowest level since 2007. This is a bright red flashing warning sign, which puts them at even greater risk for an erosion of confidence in their economy. A collapsing yuan could spiral out of control, especially if these global investors lose faith in China's ability to stabilize the markets. This is a pressure point that Donald Trump is almost certainly exploiting. Now, this doesn't necessarily mean that China's economy would collapse overnight, but the cracks are widening. They're dealing with deflation and a property sector crisis. And so empty factories are a very real problem, as they are struggling with overcapacity in industries like steel, electronics, and textiles. And the thing is, if the economy for China is hurt badly enough, Xi Jinping's regime could collapse from within, just as we saw with the USSR. And Trump knows all of this, which is why he's been targeting China's Brick and Road initiative. China has been attempting to co-opt South American nations prior to Trump getting into office, which is why he is now targeting them. This is all about knocking China out of the running to overtake the US as the world's superpower. Let's circle back to Panama. Trump's recent focus on Panama, particularly his threats to demand control over the Panama Canal or impose severe economic pressure, is all about squeezing out Chinese influence. China has deep ties with Panama, with state-backed firms like Costco Shipping and China Harbor Engineering involved in port operations and infrastructure around the canal. Over 70% of the canal's traffic involves the U.S., yet Chinese firms have been steadily expanding their footprint, including a $1.4 billion bridge project and stakes in key logistics hubs. And guess what? At all of these places, they're putting their spy network in place. Trump's rhetoric about taking back the canal isn't just about asserting U.S. dominance. It is a direct shot at Beijing's Belt and Road Initiative, which has used Panama as a strategic foothold in Latin America. By threatening 25% tariffs on Panama's exports or punitive canal fees, Trump is signaling that he is willing to use economic leverage to roll back China's presence. And Panama isn't alone here. Trump's strategy is all about dismantling China's global network, especially in regions where Beijing has gained ground. Trump's tariff threats against Mexico and Canada has indirectly pressured China's supply chains, as Chinese firms rely on these countries to bypass U.S. tariffs via nearshoring. And so by tightening the screws, Trump could force regional players to prioritize U.S. partnership over Chinese investment. Then there's Africa and Asia. Trump's America First trade policies will likely include sweeteners to countries there, like trade deals or aid for those willing to distance themselves from China. Think of Zambia or Kenya, where Chinese loans have sparked debt concerns. The U.S. might offer alternatives to peel away those nations from China's influence. And so when you add all of this together with the 145% tariffs on Chinese goods, you see all of the pieces of the puzzle begin to fall into place. Donald Trump is doing his best to cripple China's ability to fund its global ambition. By targeting China's economic engine, he is aiming to limit its capacity to project power through the BRI or military buildup. Trump's focus on China through tariffs, Panama, and elsewhere is a multi-front campaign to exploit the Chinese vulnerabilities while they are economically stretched thin. The 10% baseline tariffs on other countries will keep global pressure on, but by zeroing in on China, Trump is avoiding overextending his leverage. And for China, losing ground in places like Panama is a huge loss of face. It reveals a shrinking sphere of influence and damages China's communist pride. All of this puts Xi Jinping in a bind. If he fights back, he can either fight back and risk economic collapse, or he could concede quietly and face domestic unrest. Either way, he's over a barrel. And Donald Trump knows this and is betting that he holds the stronger hand.